Hello. Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the 28th edition of the Health System Fix podcast. I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Royan Kamyar. He is the founder and CEO of Owaves. Appreciate you being here, Royan. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Tell me a little bit about life early on, till maybe age 18. What is that like for you?
I grew up in a family of physicians, so I was lucky enough to grow up here in San Diego, and my father is actually still practicing gastroenterologist at Sharp Health, and my mom is a now retired pediatrician. She was at Rady Children's. And my older sister went into ophthalmology. So medicine was kind of always in the cards for me. Uncles, aunts, cousins, same thing. But I always wanted to start a company. And so this kind of trajectory where I ended up and I am now of physician entrepreneurship, it kind of started with my parents really embedding the practice of medicine, the sort of esteem and the respect and the quality of the field, but then my own kind of native interest in trying to start a business, run a company, I was more excited by that. And so really, my first 18 years, besides playing soccer, was just reconciling these two interests until finally, when I went to university, decided to do both, pursue pre-medicine and business, and finally, same as you, MD, MBA, combined degree pathway. Rady actually didn't exist when I left San Diego for university. But then when I was looking for a place to do my MBA, I found out UC San Diego had built a business school back here at home. It was like a dream come true. It was too good to be true. And I wrote that in my application and really didn't look back.
Yeah, I had been thinking about an MBA for many years, and I got mine probably 3, 4 years into finishing my training. And life circumstances, we just had a kid at that time. So all of that, Rady was the only one I even applied to. With all of those things, Rady was my really only choice, and it was a great experience, of course. So obviously, I think sounds like you love the field of medicine, but also how you would approach it was different. So does from your experience, it is not necessarily a non-traditional route. That's something you had been thinking about forever.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people feel like, oh, geez, I must have hated medicine. The reality is I had opened the door to practicing. And then what happened was I did my intern year in Manhattan. And, I was basically in the business, as you know, wearing the white coat and telling people to take better care of themselves. But especially as a prelim medicine year, intern in downtown Manhattan, we were not taking good care of ourselves. We were really living the most unhealthy lifestyles, and it was just too ironic. And I realized like this wasn't a surprise in the sense that I had seen my father's lifestyle, very busy, nighttime calls, work the weekends, and then of course, as a pre med student, you see the nature of the beast. That it's very intense lifestyles that lead to success in this field. But then it was really just the irony of taking care of patients with chronic disease that was just intractable to whatever medications we were providing. And you know that they don't know how these medicines work. They're not convinced it's going to help them. Their compliance is just not great. And we weren't taking the time to educate them, to really stress the importance of self care, exercise, sleep. We were just depending on this pill mill, if you will. And so I just really saw an opportunity ultimately for prevention. And I became increasingly passionate about that during my time at Rady. And actually, it was a venture capital internship during my first and second years of MBA, where I saw how much money was going to end of life care, which was just also kind of shocking. But then you see it as a medical intern and obviously as a resident and practicing physician, all the attention that goes into, let's say, ICU care or terminal cancer diagnoses, there's just so many resources being poured in to extend what might be like a 3-month timeline to a 6-month timeline. And then meanwhile, you have all these desperate families trying to figure out power of attorney, and it's just a terrible scene. So it's just really not streamlined, definitely inefficient. And then meanwhile, we're not addressing all these upstream issues in terms of how people are getting there in the first place. And so part of my inspiration during this journey was the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, Dr. Dean Ornish and his body of work. And he actually spoke during my second year at Baylor College of Medicine, and it kind of stuck in my mind that we're really not addressing the upstream causes of chronic disease, which also ultimately comes down to healthy lifestyle. And so I became increasingly passionate about that.
It took me much longer to realize this, that I think medicine is not teaching us how to stay healthy. It's primarily teaching us how to fix illness. And that's something that I feel patients are also now kind of seeing the value is high for somebody who is very sick, but anybody not very sick, the value from medicine, medical care is not that high. And I think that could also explain lack of adherence and all of those things with medication. And, also I think medicine has to reconcile with the fact that the diagnosis is not the be all and end all of what this person's life is, which is kind of what a lot of medical training tends to be about sometimes.
Right. I think this new generation cares, like, they're savvy and they're sort of paying attention, like, that was a huge inspiration for me, like, I knew as successful as my parents were, they had chronic disease, like, they were suffering from heart disease and, I knew stress, especially in my father's case, was a contributing factor. So just following the footsteps of our parent generation and blindly, sadly, the default pathway for an American this day and age is one of chronic disease. I believe it's 2/3 or 3/4 now of the United States is either obese or overweight, and it's half the population is either pre-diabetic or diabetic. And so if we just kind of blindly follow the paths of our parent generation, sadly, we will suffer. And so, this notion of healthy lifestyle and getting upstream of chronic disease, I do feel like it's reaching sort of a critical mass or, potentially tipping points that, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, for example, I mentioned, I remember going to conferences in 2014, 2015, no one frankly had heard of them, and they had spun out of American College of Preventive Medicine in 2004. But now there's like over 10,000 clinicians. They literally sell out their conferences. Like, you have to join virtually if you sign up too late. So I do think there's a movement now. And Gen Z or Gen Alpha, whatever you want to call it, the new generation does want to not follow the default pathway of chronic disease. They want to, get in front of it. And the recipe is pretty clear. One of the few things that Eastern, Western, all physicians agree on is exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress management, relationships. No one's disagreeing on that. It's just really the implementation.
Right. In all areas of medicine and all specialties, I definitely, from a psychiatry standpoint, mental health perspective, I think, yes, we are set up to add significant value to somebody who's extremely sick, but not really anybody else. Most of the population is in the other zone of that their journey, and we absolutely do need to change how we approach that. You were part of the All of Us research program, NIH Precision Medicine Initiative. Can you tell me a little bit about that work?
Sure, Gaurav, I just want to make sure to mention. So, my wife's a psychiatrist as well. And so we went to the APA conference. I don't know if you were there last year in Los Angeles.
I was not.
But, the theme was actually lifestyle psychiatry. And so I think it's finally, kind of hitting different categories of medicine and psychiatry, like you mentioned, especially, I think there's such a huge opportunity to get upstream of what you see in the clinic. And so the outgoing president, I think that lifestyle psychiatry the theme for APA for last year, and Gia Merlo from NYU was kind of leading the working groups around implementation and CMEs for lifestyle psychiatry. So hopefully we'll be seeing more and more. And so in terms of the All of Us research program and NIH Precision Medicine Initiative, it was another one of these kind of serendipitous kind of dream come true opportunities where I had always been admiring Dr. Eric Topol, especially as a MBA student at Rady and looking for, entrepreneurial opportunities. He was really preaching the gospel of the intersection of healthcare and technology, right? Because that was really kind of up and coming at the time. And actually, my MBA years basically spanned the High Tech Act. So I was there from 2008, 2010, and the High Tech Act went through 2009. And that was essentially when physicians were mandated to make the switch from paper medical records to electronic medical records. Fitbit had just launched in '07. The iPhone and App Store were just getting started. So it was really this huge opportunity that we all saw around digital health. And Dr. Topol is kind of the leading spokesperson for the future that we see here. He's also an expert in genomics, and so that was part of what had drawn me into some of his conferences and lectures. But long story short, I had seen that he had won the largest grant for a single PI in San Diego County history, and it was this historic All of Us research program initiative. I was already starting Owaves, and the discipline is just focus on your startup. Can't really do anything else. So I kind of saw it from the side. But it was actually another Rady MBA, Katie Bakamotes, who I met at a Fitbit conference in Chicago of all places, because they're also based in San Diego. But I met her in Chicago with is Dr. Topol's right hand man at that time, Dr. Steven Steinhubel, another cardiologist. And I was just kind of geeking out and showing them my Owaves app. And apparently, Steve told Katie after we met, like, that's the kind of guy we need at Scripps helping with this precision medicine initiative. And so, long story short, I ended up consulting, and then finally, my whole team started basically helping the project, which is a pretty ambitious project. It's kind of framed as a modern day Framingham study, so it's supposed to be longitudinal, like lifespan, potentially lasting longer than our own lifetimes, studying 1 million people across the United States and intentionally very diverse. So, a real focus on historically underrepresented populations. And, it was really the brainchild of Dr. Francis Collins, this program, because he was one of the first to, along with Craig Venter, Dr. Collins represented the public arm for decoding the first complete human genome. Dr. Venter was the private arm. They kind of announced it simultaneously. And, his insight, Dr. Collins' insight was the first genome was really determined by a small set of like Caucasian males in the Northeast of the United States. And what they realized is that that's not representative of not just the US population, but the global population at large. There's much more diversity that needs to be understood to take full advantage of genetics as a field. And then, of course, was the ultimate realizations that not everything's embedded in your DNA after all. And of course, you need lifestyle data, you need environmental data. And so this was really an ambitious project that he saw kind of coming out of that experience, decoding the first human genome of what we really need as a nation or as a species, to really understand human health. And the nature of disease. And so the goal is really to track as many dimensions of an individual's health data, whether it's EMR, Fitbit, they call exposomes. So like, air quality, zip code, they say ZNAs can be more predictive of your DNA. So getting all these factors into place that academicians and researchers can query this data set and come up with new, more individualized conclusions. And so really the goal is to get out of one size fits all medicine and start recognizing diversity in the species for how we approach disease. And I think that the best mental model to really understand the program is actually the UK Biobank. And so every day now we see quality studies coming out of this data set of it's at least 100,000 and maybe approaching a million. But essentially, it's this large data set where again it's DNA, electronic medical records, lifestyle data, and then based off that, researchers can draw new conclusions around whether there's different correlations or sometimes they do prospective studies as well.
A couple of questions from that I had was how intentionally the project is working towards having a more diverse population to study, right? What were some of the challenges that you came across?
Great. Well, I mean, that really gets into, fortunately, my focus was mostly on the digital side. So we came in as like, the app um, gurus or whatever, because we had a lot of success with Always on the App Store. And so really getting that consumer kind of more widespread user experience. So it's a fun and rewarding experience. That was a kind of our role. But the program and the team obviously were responsible for this challenging task of recruiting participants who had really been, let's face it, like abused by the system in the past, right? We have the Tuskegee incidents, we have the Henrietta Lacks story. And we have so many reasons why large populations within the United States should not trust the government when it comes to their healthcare data, right? Because they've really been abused by the system in the past. And so then our role, and when I say our, it was really the broader team members that really had to go in front of these communities and say, hey, look, you can trust us now. Like we're doing this responsibly. Here's what we're doing on the back end to protect your data. Here are the rights you have. Here are the advisory board positions or conferences that you can attend to actually inform how we use our data. So this study was unique in that it was much more participatory in the past. There's participants all the way up the ladder to, really kind of informing protocol updates and, really how the IRB was run. And it was a really historic effort, and it's still undergoing. And out of the million, I think that we're north of 800,000 now. And again, I think it's one of these kind of role model studies where participants are truly participating not just in providing their data, but also how that data is getting used and protected. throughout the lifetime of the program.
Yeah, great. Let's talk about Owaves, and can you tell us a little? I know I've been watching you kind of from the sidelines, mostly on LinkedIn and looking at your website for over years now. What is that initial startup journey and the journey till today?
Thanks, Gaurav. Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of what got me into prevention and lifestyle medicine in the first place was this wearing a white coat, telling people to take good care of themselves and not taking care of myself or embodying any of that at all. It was just too ironic. It was too thick. And so I was actually in my Rady MBA, like starting out, and I had my notebook and my pen, and I was just like, okay, I need to obviously go to my classes and get the most out of the program. But at the same time, I had an internship and obviously girlfriend, relationship, family at home in San Diego. And I wanted to exercise and I wanted to actually start meditating more. And I had all these activities that I needed to squeeze into a 24-hour day. And I really wanted to embody at this point in my life, especially coming in fresh off my intern year, healthy lifestyle. I wanted a healthy lifestyle was bottom line. And so I just started like drawing it, with paper and pen in my planner. What does this look like? Like, how do I spend my 24 hours? Because, I came to this, somewhat obvious conclusion. Like, guess what? Every day I have 24 hours. Like, I can figure this out. Like, let me just, figure out this formula. And it was very visual for me. And honestly, I was pretty satisfied with paper and pen with my notebook for a while. And then there was one point where I realized, oh, this could help my younger brother because he was in law school at the time. And also having this like stressful, disrupted sleep wake cycle. I was like, oh, if I digitize this formula I'm baking for myself, like he can use it, on his own. And so that's actually the first time I realized that, what I was doing for myself with paper and pen could turn into a project. And so when I had saved up enough money after graduating from MBA, I ran with it. And so 2013, we incorporated the company and really just been a joyride ever since in terms of doing something I'm passionate about and can help myself and I know can help others. So it's been really fun.
What have been some of the challenges of building the company?
I mean, it's the same challenges for prevention as a whole, and you know it, which is it's just not reimbursed. It's not incentivized by the system. And so, as you know, there's just very little reward for sitting down and telling someone all the values around exercise and eating right. It's hard to monetize that. And so I think there's been some winners in the space, and it's always funny, how you judge the winners. But Fitbit, I would consider like someone who made a huge meaningful impact in terms of giving everyone a tool to start prioritizing wellness, right? And it's funny though, because some investors or business folks will look at that and say, well, Fitbit ultimately sold for cash to Google, right? Like whatever cash it had was like kind of the valuation when it finally got acquired and exited. Nevertheless, I think starting from the pedometer, the lowly pedometer back in '05, '06, before they started in '07, and turning that into like an everyday wellness item that now everyone knows and is building on top of, like, to me that's a huge win. And and clinicians were obviously ignoring that data. They didn't want to deal with it. More liability, more information to take in during a very finite visit. But eventually these devices are, brought into ERs, brought into clinics. Patients are getting more savvy about their personal data and bringing it up to primary care physicians. And so now we have Validic and all Epics finally embracing, all these lifestyle medicine parameters that we call them lifestyle vital signs. And so that's been exciting to see. But yeah, the reimbursement mechanisms, the fee for service and sick care model that we have, they just aren't built for prevention. And so finding the sweet spots has been the challenge. And there have been success stories. Some other success stories, at least in my mind, include Calm and Headspace and the traction they made just with pure mindfulness meditation interventions on the App Store. So there's some wins out there, and slowly and steadily we're carving out our own.
Yeah, and was convincing people who are well to use something like this, is that a challenge?
It's you can appreciate there's different like psychographics and market segmentations that we do on the business side. Physicians don't really segment their patients, right? I mean, probably you do as a psychiatrist, but very few, I think, come in with like some sort of categorization of how to approach each individual patient to really to get at these like deeper needs that bring them in for services. So, LOHAS is an acronym for lifestyle, health, and sustainability, and it's a kind of a market segment that had been identified where the type of consumer that would shop at Whole Foods, that would own an electric car, right? So you kind of understand that there's certain demographics that actually sometimes they're called the worried well, like the people who bought Fitbits and monitor their heart rates on the Apple Watch. They might already be healthy, but they're college educated and they are thinking of preventing chronic disease because they see that happening with family members or the parent generation. And so they're super savvy and self-motivated in that way. And I think there's just different pockets, right? So that's one kind of broad category that I think a lot of the wellness companies have found traction with, like, mindfulness meditation. That's part of this low cost characterization. They're more likely to go to yoga class. They're more likely to practice meditation, things like that. So you can find pockets. It's really that behavior change aspect, right? Which, we used to, call it, for better or worse, like the sort of the six pack Joe. And how do you move him or her off the couch to really get into lifelong behavior change? I think that's where the real challenge is for the system, frankly. But that's where the improvement lies. And long story short, our approach to that strategy is, I think it's tough when people hit their 40s, 50s and have already adopted, frankly, an unhealthy lifestyle, to really shift them. We kind of learned that with my last company, which was more focused on sort of downstream chronic disease. I think the opportunities with younger folks where they're really developing lifestyle habits for the first time, and they have the appetite for change, and they have the appetite for information that makes them a better version of themselves. So that's where we've been approaching our efforts.
Yeah. I'll tell you, even personally, my dad has been exercising daily all throughout my childhood, and he still
Wow,
does, right?
amazing.
And that was, I mean, for me and my brother, that was a great example to see. We didn't adopt that example, frankly, though, for a long
Okay.
time. And I was probably 36. And unfortunately, we had two extended family members who suddenly passed.
Well,
And one was 40, male, one of those 45, male. And it was really very shocking to see that. My older son was 1.5 years old at that time. It really made me think about all the plans I had in my head with him and just for my life. And it really, I think, the segment of late 30s, early 40, men, women, everybody, I think is also significantly undertapped, maybe, or people are just about hopefully switching on their understanding. Okay, you got to take care of yourself now, otherwise it may be too late if you start at 60 or it's never too late. But you know,
I think you're right. There's probably, and again, I think it comes down to like understanding these different demographics, right? Like there's different populations, there's different motivations out there. And so if you can find the right pockets, like people who are having these kind of family or life experiences that are waking them up to the importance of lifestyle, I agree with you. There's opportunities there for sure.
yeah, for me, it really shifted. It was no longer optional. And, and now I've been on this journey for 6, 7 years. So now I don't even, my brain doesn't even go to, I don't want to. I'm lucky I'm lucky I'm no longer there. But I mean, it was a struggle for sure.
They have those, I think it's like the theoretical model of behavior change, right? So there's like pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, and then maintenance. And, sometimes they throw in the relapse where you kind of go back through the cycle again. But I think best case scenario is you get people in an upward spiral, right? Where they're kind of like ideally mostly in the maintenance phase, but then if they do relapse, it's to a better baseline such that when they do the cycle again, they're kind of always moving in an upward trajectory.
Exercise, luckily, in the last at least 3 years, I've not relapsed, but diet for sure. I'm in that repeating spiral.
Every time my mother-in-law comes to visit, I have a
Yeah.
little minor relapse. Yeah.
Yeah. My mom is visiting right now, so I'm in my I'm allowing myself to enjoy the relapse a little bit. Let me ask you, so when I was doing my MBA, so me, Richard, and Nick were kind of three physicians. You were our entrepreneur
I
guide. We
remember
met
that.
at meeting a couple of times, and we proposed the idea to you, and half joking, and I know half serious. You said, first of all, you have three doctors on your team, and that's all the team was. And I think you said like you got to diversify your team and ideas, which is great insight. I'm in the moment. I'm working on developing a program or a company in the dementia care space. I've now worked in the system for so long, 11 plus years, built a lot of mental health, addiction medicine programs, and just see the fragmentation of care, which is not meeting the family's needs, the patient's needs, and especially dementia. I see the gap is huge. And this is going to be treatment focused, or for the, I guess, the people who are sick or maybe quite sick, right, for them and family. But I also want to build this kind of upstream eventually. W- I've not even incorporated myself. I know it's very broad, but what thoughts and advice do you have for somebody kind of starting on down this path?
Well, there's always the get started one. So, but I think you've started businesses before, right? You mentioned the company that you're working at, Rady, and so you probably know that part of it. Whatever factors are holding you back, I would say just, start, incorporate, get on LegalZoom, whatever you need to do to get the ball rolling. And then there's actually a Bill Walton quote that I saw recently. He was a big contributor to the innovation ecosystem here in San Diego. And on the San Diego Sports Innovator website, they have a quote from him that's something along the lines of like, if you want to get where you're going, talk to someone who's on the way back. So I would say for dementia, I think there's been so many programs up and running right about now because it is sort of a, sadly booming space. Like baby boomer population has kind of started already hitting 65 and older. And so like we're kind of in this stage where more and more families are trying to address this crisis. There's got to be one or two super successful businesses, and I would just beeline to those people and talk to them. I think when I was younger, I was always thinking of it as like a competitive threat. Oh, they'll get my ideas or whatever. But I think that's just, especially in a space like dementia, it's just, there's so many patients, sadly, that you really don't have to worry about that. And at the end of the day, you guys can probably help each other when it comes to, formulating your businesses and referring clients and things like that.
In healthcare in general, I think the need is so high that sometimes San Diego County, unfortunately, see a lot of information hoarding, and sometimes I'm seeing lack of collaboration across health systems. And I think it could everybody, not just the patient. It could help the health systems themselves. And one of the things I'm working on right now is really trying to figure out a reimbursement model. I think that's that's going to be key for sustainability. I don't know if you mind talking about Owaves sustainable financial model and sustainability model. How do you think about that?
You know, there's a lot of precedent for apps to have a paid version in the App Store. So that was an easy. So we were actually on that NIH grant for 5 years. We just got off, I want to say summer of 24. So we launched our first subscription January 25. And we hadn't been charging our customers on the App Store before that. We were just building and surviving off the grant. Now that we have our first direct to consumer subscription, we're looking at B2B opportunities. And this kind of comes back to the psychodemographic profiling and, ideal customer persona exercises that, we've been doing with our data that we have collected over the 10 plus years we've been on the App Store for free, which is we do get older adults using the platform, but we just have this loud signal from young adults. Like there's just the most traction there. And we think again, it's not only being more flexible to like an adaptive kind of dynamic lifestyle, it's also just more digital native. So for older folks, like, I've interviewed retired people who said, geez, I lived my whole career living off a calendar. Now that I'm retired, like, I don't want to see a calendar. 60 plus crowd, scratch it off. Oh, they don't want to deal with a calendar. The younger generation kind of gets the value of having a digital calendar. Everything involved in their life, is somehow inside their phone anyways. So it's just a little bit more native. Now monetizing the sort of younger demographic is challenging because like college students are poor. They don't have a ton of money. So I think for B2B, we're looking at universities as kind of where we've gravitated. And it looks like we will win our first contract here locally in San Diego. So that's pretty exciting for us.
That's great. I wish you well on that.
Thank you.
Um, okay, I think coming to our last question, what is the most exciting or challenging problem you're working on today?
Well, I think this is the same theme of preaching healthy lifestyles to college students, essentially what it comes down to. I think if you zero in on the formula for a long, healthy life, which again, whether it's American College of Lifestyle Medicine or the Singapore, Academy of Lifestyle Medicine, exercise, sleep, nutrition, manage your stress, and relationships, right? Those are like the key pillars of a long, healthy life. Getting college students to learn that this is how you take care of yourself. This is how you prevent chronic disease when you're older. This is how you prevent the mental health issues that are essentially, epidemic on campus, right? Over one out of every two college students will suffer from some symptom of depression or anxiety by the time they graduate. How do you get in front of that? Well, this is the recipe. Now the APA is embodying it, evangelizing it as well. So getting that word out to college students as they enter the door, such that by the time they graduate, they're already embedding these healthy lifestyle habits and practices when they get in the workplace, which is a lot of the times when most of us start gravitating to the 9 to 5 and kind of loss of self-care as a routine. So that's the joy, that's the hope and the practice, which is getting the word out about the importance and significance of lifestyle medicine to college students. By the time they graduate, they're kind of well embedded and prepared for the next, hopefully many, many decades.
Thank you so much, Royan. It's a pleasure talking to you again, and I wish you well in your working on the B2B part of the business. I would
Thank
encourage
you.
everybody to check out Owaves.
Okay, let's please stay in touch. It was nice to catch up.